Snow pelted the observation dome like a sky full of thrown rice. Inside, warmth hummed from beneath the floor, and the alien known as Ferric of the Trelvani Confederation stared at the monitor with a twitch of disbelief. The camera drone zoomed in again on the subject, an adult male Homo sapiens, pale skin flushed pink, standing outside in -20 Fahrenheit weather, wearing shorts and a sweatshirt that read, "Minnesota, cold enough for ya?" Ferric's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. He turned slowly to his colleague, a junior xenobiologist named Palak, who was hunched over a tablet reviewing thermal tolerance data on mammalian species. "Palak," Ferric said, tapping the monitor, "explain this." Palak looked up, then frowned. "That has to be a malfunction. No human could survive that exposure unprotected. Their dermal limits cap at -10 before frostbite becomes irreversible." "Well," Ferric said, turning back to the screen, "this one seems to be challenging your dataset." The human was shoveling snow from a driveway with practiced indifference, his breath misting in the icy air. He paused once to sip from a steaming mug, then returned to work, his knees bare and practically glowing. "His name is Randall Grayson," Ferric added, pulling up the local town registry. "Age 32. Occupation, mechanical engineer. Native to this region." Palak squinted. "He's not even shivering." "No. He is. Whistling." Outside the dome, the blizzard howled as the Trelvani stealth vessel remained cloaked, hovering above a quiet residential neighborhood in northern Minnesota. The mission had been simple: study Earth's dominant species to determine compatibility with Trelvani colonization protocols. Early assessments had already flagged humans as temperature-fragile, intolerant of extremes, prone to overheating or freezing without layers of protective gear, emotionally volatile in sudden climate shifts. But Randall Grayson was rewriting the entire profile. Down below, oblivious to the interstellar scrutiny, Randall dumped a final scoop of snow onto the growing pile and leaned on his shovel. His breath came in slow, visible puffs. He took another sip from his mug black coffee, hot enough to burn the roof of his mouth, and surveyed the driveway with satisfaction. "Looks clean enough," he muttered, brushing a dusting of snow from his shoulder. He sniffed, wiped his nose on his sleeve, and turned to go back inside. The front door opened before he touched the handle. "Randall, are you serious?" Whitney called from inside. She was wrapped in a robe, holding a thick blanket around her shoulders like a cape. Her hair was still damp from the shower. "You're gonna lose your kneecaps or something." "I'm fine," he said, stepping inside and stomping snow off his boots. "I grew up here, remember? You grew up with a jacket. And pants." Randall grinned, teeth chattering a little now that he was back in the warm air. "Shorts are freedom." Whitney rolled her eyes but handed him a towel. "You're gonna get sick." "Already got my flu shot." "I'm invincible. Until your thighs turn purple and fall off." Ferric's ship had been in orbit for 5 weeks. In that time, they had cataloged over 300 human behaviors under cold stress. Most aligned with expectations. Humans bundled in layers, sought heated shelters, complained ceaselessly about the temperature. Children cried when they lost mittens. Adults cursed when their car batteries died. No anomalies, until Randall. Ferric had watched him for 3 consecutive mornings. Each day, temperatures dropped further. And each day, Randall emerged in his shorts, shovel in hand, expression unconcerned. Palak had begun running metabolic simulations. "He must have some kind of genetic mutation," Palak said over breakfast, stirring a bright orange nutrient paste. "Maybe his blood circulates differently. Maybe his skin has advanced vasoconstriction." Ferric tapped his own terminal. "I found no medical records to support that. No anomalous traits reported. He's had 3 broken bones, a wheat allergy, and seasonal asthma. Then it has to be psychological. Maybe he's maladjusted." Or, Ferric said, watching Randall throw a snowball at a mailbox for no apparent reason, "maybe humans are more adaptable than we thought." Randall's thighs stung when he walked back inside, but he didn't let Whitney see it. She was curled on the couch with a space heater pointed at her legs, sipping chamomile and watching a rerun of some baking show. He sat beside her and reached for the blanket, but she yanked it tighter around herself. "Nope," she said. "You chose shorts, you live with shorts. Not even a corner? Not even a thread." He groaned, then pulled his legs up and rubbed them. The skin was red but not numb. Yet, the next morning he did it again. And the morning after that. By the fourth day, the Trelvani had dispatched a surface scouting drone. The drone was a small, disc-shaped probe equipped with adaptive camouflage and environmental sensors. It hovered silently, invisible to human eyes, and stationed itself just above Randall's fence line. Randall stepped outside at 6:45, coffee in one hand, shovel in the other. He wore a Minnesota Vikings hoodie, cargo shorts, and a pair of thick wool socks inside his boots. It was -25, wind chill pushing it closer to -35. He looked up at the sky once, narrowing his eyes. The drone froze. Randall shrugged and started shoveling. The drone edged closer. Inside the ship, Ferrick monitored the feed. Still no signs of thermal distress, Palak muttered. His vitals are steady, core temperature within survival parameters. This shouldn't be possible. Ferrick leaned closer. He's paused. On screen, Randall had stopped shoveling. He was staring at the tool in his hand, then at the snow, then back at the sky. His breath came short, his shoulders slumped. Ferrick adjusted the volume. Forget this, Randall muttered. Should have moved to Arizona. He dropped the shovel and walked back inside. 2 hours later, Randall was at the clinic. Dr. Lillian Bowers frowned as she examined his legs. You're lucky. Mild frost nip, but no frostbite. Randall winced. Just felt like a sting. Didn't think it was that bad. She raised an eyebrow. You've been out in this for how long? Maybe 20 minutes a day? Without pants. He looked sheepish. They're cargo shorts. Lots of pocket room. Pockets don't keep you warm. Back on the ship, Ferrick recorded the medical visit in the log. Even with damage, he continues this behavior, Palak said. Is it ritual? Is there social status involved? I don't think so, Ferrick replied. No one else in his neighborhood imitates him. In fact, most react with disapproval. Palak looked confused. Then why? Ferrick watched Randall again that evening, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea as he iced his knees. I think, Ferrick said slowly, he does it because he can. The next morning, Randall wore pants. The entire time he shoveled, he wore them. Ferrick stared at the screen in silence. Palak scribbled in his notes. But then, as Randall neared the end of the driveway, he paused, looked around, glanced at the sky. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, he stepped behind his truck, took off his pants, and finished the last 5 feet in shorts. Ferrick's jaw dropped. Palak made a noise of disbelief. Randall, red-kneed and grinning, waved at no one in particular, then turned and walked back inside. That evening, Palak demanded a meeting with the Confederation's Earth Adaptability Council. We have to reclassify human cold tolerance, he insisted. This one he challenges the extremity model. One of the counselors, a gray-scaled analyst named Nure, blinked slowly. You're saying one human invalidates 50 years of data? I'm saying he proves outliers exist. And if there's one, there could be more. Nure frowned. Or he's simply insane. Ferrick stood beside Palak. Insanity doesn't maintain stable vitals. He's not reckless. He's calculated. He endures discomfort for a reason. Which is? Ferrick paused. Because he refuses to let the cold win. 2 weeks later, Randall slipped on his icy walkway and landed hard on his right arm. The pain was instant and sharp. Whitney rushed him to urgent care. After an X-ray and a grim-faced physician's assistant, Randall sat in a sling with a fractured radius. You'll need 4 to 6 weeks, the doctor said. Minimal strain. No shoveling. Guess the snow wins this round, Randall muttered. Whitney squeezed his hand. Told you. Outside, the snow kept falling. Ferrick logged the injury. He watched Randall's recovery. The man stayed inside, grumbled at the window, and watched weather reports like war briefings. But he healed. And when the sling came off, Randall waited 1 more day before stepping outside again. In shorts, Palak shook his head. He's going to break something else. Maybe, Ferrick said. But he's also going to finish that driveway. Over the next month, the Trelvani revised their Earth protocols. Human adaptability was upgraded. Colonization plans were delayed, pending further investigation of psychological resilience factors. Randall, unaware of the interstellar impact of his wardrobe choices, kept shoveling. And though he sometimes wore pants, especially after the break, he always finished in shorts. Because he could. His epidermis is visibly inflamed again, Palak said, tapping the magnified feed of Randall's legs. Localized swelling in the anterior tibial region. Likely bruising from the fall last month. Ferric didn't look up. He was watching a separate feed and overhead view of Randall's backyard where the human was attempting to assemble what appeared to be a homemade sled ramp using plywood, buckets, and a plastic folding table. He's injured and still refuses to rest. He can't even lift that sheet properly. Look at his gait. Yes, Ferric said slowly, but he's improvising. Palak exhaled through his gill slits. Improvisation is not exclusive to humans. No, but the frequency with which they do it, especially in adverse conditions, is statistically absurd. His partner is gone again. That may be why he's being more reckless. Ferric flicked to a secondary data window. Correct. Whitney left for work at the hospital this morning. 11-hour shift. He's alone until dusk. Randall, unaware of the two Trelvani silently watching from orbit, dropped the plywood with a grunt and winced. He paused, rubbed his arm, then maneuvered the sheet with his foot instead, nudging it into position atop the buckets. He's adapting around his own limitations, Ferric muttered. Using lower body leverage to compensate for compromised limb function. Or he's just stubborn. Same result. The camera zoomed in as Randall stood back, surveyed his work, then walked over to the garage and returned with a bright red plastic sled. He set it at the top of the makeshift ramp and stared at it for several seconds. Then he turned and walked back inside. Palak raised a brow ridge. He gave up. Ferric watched the door. Wait. 6 minutes later, Randall emerged wearing a helmet and holding a GoPro camera clamped awkwardly to it with duct tape. He also had a towel tucked into the back of his shorts like a cape. Oh no, Palak said. Randall climbed onto the ramp. At the exact moment Randall launched himself down the plywood incline, the council's envoy ship arrived. It shimmered into view just long enough to make contact with the cloaked Trelvani vessel, then vanished again. Aboard it, Councillor Nure stepped onto Ferric's bridge with a look of severe disapproval. "This is the human?" she asked, gesturing to the screen, where Randall was currently airborne, mid-sled, arms flailing. The camera captured the moment he landed feet first in a snowbank and immediately tumbled head over heels into a recycling bin. "Yes," Ferric said. "This is Randall Grayson. I see. He's concussed." "No," Palak said, scanning the telemetry. "That was a controlled crash." He rotated his torso to protect the injured arm. Likely a spinal jolt, but no cranial impact. The counselor watched as Randall sat up, shook snow from his helmet, and gave the GoPro a thumbs up. "Why am I here?" Ferric turned to her. "Because our initial colonization model flagged humans as physically unsuitable for long-term exposure to cold climates. And yet this one continues to operate voluntarily in conditions that should immobilize him. I read the summary. You believe he is an outlier. I believe he is a pattern waiting to be discovered." Nure folded her arms. "And this is worth delaying the expedition?" Ferric gestured toward the screen again. Randall was now adjusting the ramp, trying to increase the incline by stacking the buckets higher. One wobbled dangerously. "He does not stop," Ferric said. "Even when injured, even when alone, even when failure is likely. He recalibrates, tries again. Not for status. Not even for survival. For the act itself. Recklessness is not resilience. But resilience can look like recklessness." Nure's antennae twitched. She said nothing. Down below, Randall adjusted the sled, took a running start, and launched again. This time, the ramp collapsed mid-slide, sending him tumbling sideways into the table leg. He groaned, rolled over, and just lay there. "Ah," Palak said. "Now he's done." On screen, Randall sat up slowly. Then he started laughing. For hours later, Randall limped into the kitchen holding a bag of frozen peas to his hip. He set his phone on the table and tapped the screen. "Hey Whit," he said to the empty room. "If you're watching this later. No broken bones. Just a bruise. Ramp needs some structural work. Might need to steal more buckets from the garage." He paused. "Also, I think I invented a new method of snow removal. The sled takes out a solid path every time. Way faster than shoveling. If I can get the angle right, I won't even have to steer." He turned off the camera, leaned back in the chair, and rested the peas on his shoulder instead. That evening, Ferrick reviewed the footage from the past 8 days. Randall had constructed 3 versions of the ramp. The first collapsed. The second held but lacked speed. The third showed promise. He had used rope to anchor it to the fence, increasing stability. Despite reduced upper body strength, Randall had managed 3 full runs without incident. He had even begun modifying the sled with strips of foam to reduce vibration on impact. "His injury has become a design constraint," Ferrick said aloud. "He's engineering solutions around his own body." Nure looked at the data silently for several minutes. "Fine," she said at last. "You want more time, you have it. 2 weeks. After that, I want an answer." Ferrick nodded. "That's all I need." By the next day, Randall had added side walls to the ramp using scrapwood and zip ties. He launched twice before the cold forced him inside. This time, he checked his pulse, took his temperature, and noted visible bruising in a small notebook. Ferrick watched him write. "He's documenting himself now. Perhaps he knows we're watching," Palak said. Ferrick shook his head. "No, he's preparing to improve." 3 days later, Whitney returned from work just before sunset. Randall was in the garage, adjusting the sled's bottom with sandpaper and muttering to himself. "You're not going to stop until you wreck your spine, are you?" she asked. "I added padding and side rails. It works now." She narrowed her eyes. "You're limping again. Unrelated. You want to explain why there's a trail of snow leading directly to the fridge? I needed ice. Ice that's now melting on the floor? I was gonna mop." Whitney stepped forward, took the sandpaper from his hand, and sighed. "You're ridiculous. I'm proving a principle. You're proving you're not qualified to live unsupervised." He grinned. "I'm a scientist now. No, you're a man with a bruised hip and a vendetta against winter. That's not mutually exclusive." That night, Randall sat on the couch with a heating pad and his notebook. Whitney brought him tea and stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. "You're charting impact angles?" "Yeah. If I can minimize lateral drift, I think I can get a full 90-degree turn at the end." She blinked. "You're building a sled course now?" "Technically a luge path. I've got most of the yard mapped." Whitney stared at him for a long time. "Then I married a lunatic. No refunds. Do I get hazard pay?" "Only if you help with the next test run." "I want a helmet." "You'll need 2. The following morning, Randall set up a second sled. Whitney stood beside him, fully bundled, lips tight. "You sure about this?" she asked. "You said you wanted hazard pay." She climbed on. Randall gave her a push. The sled shot forward, hit the ramp, soared slightly, then landed cleanly and skidded to a stop 30 feet away. Whitney sat up, blinking. "Well?" she whooped. From orbit, Ferrick recorded everything. Nure stood beside him, silent. "2 humans now," Ferrick said. "Both voluntarily engaging the cold. Both modifying equipment. Both experiencing success." "They're insane," Nure said. "Yes." He paused. "But they endure." 10 days later, the Confederation's colonization file on Earth was amended. Human cold resilience. Currently underestimated due to behavioral variance. Recommend further observation. Potential for adaptive cohabitation. High. Randall never saw the report, but he did build a second ramp. Whitney opened the freezer and frowned. "Why are there peas in every drawer?" Randall, crouched beside the laundry basket trying to tape foam to a snow boot, didn't look up. "Backup supply. For inflammation. And snacks. We have actual ice packs. They don't counter like a good bag of peas." She set the bag of frozen waffles on the counter and turned toward him. You know the neighbors think we're some kind of high-altitude cult. They didn't say that. They did. I heard Mrs. Halvorsen mention it while she was walking her dog. Something about the ritual of the flying sled and bare legs and God's fury. Randall finished taping the last strip of foam and stood up, testing the boot's flexibility by bouncing slightly on his heels. They're just jealous. They're worried. Of what? That you're going to end up in traction because you turned a suburban yard into a bobsled course with insufficient structural bracing. It's anchored. It's anchored to a grill and a lawn chair. They're very heavy. Whitney sighed. You've got bruises in places I can't even name. That's why I'm padding everything now. You tried to duct tape a yoga mat to your chest. It worked. She turned back to the freezer. The waffles are solid ice now. Hope you're happy. I am. Outside, the wind pushed a low sheet of snow across the backyard, smoothing the sled path like nature's Zamboni. Randall squinted through the glass and gave a satisfied nod. In orbit, the Trelvani Council's auxiliary vessel drifted just beneath the ionosphere, now hosting a full contingent of cultural analysts. Ferrick stood at the helm of the observation deck, his focus locked on the ground-level feed. He's reinforced the track with what appears to be garage shelving, Palak murmured, adjusting the resolution. And he's added a windscreen to the sled. Made from a broken aquarium lid. Is it functional? Marginally. It reduces drag, but visibility is compromised. Ferrick tilted his head. He's willing to sacrifice vision for speed? Apparently. Counselor Nuray's eyes narrowed. That's not engineering. That's lunacy. He adjusted again, Ferrick said. Watch his gait. Randall stepped out onto the snow in his foam-padded boots, now wearing what could only be described as a homemade flight suit, layers of thermal shirts under a rain poncho cinched with a climbing harness and belted at the waist with bungee cords. His knees were exposed. Not again, Nuray groaned. He's not in shorts this time, Palak noted. His knees are still bare. It's symbolic, Ferrick said. Randall climbed onto the sled, adjusted his helmet, and muttered something to himself before launching. The sled careened down the track, gained speed, and hit the new ramp extension, a gentle upward curve created with a bent section of gutter and 2 stacked storage bins. It lifted briefly, then landed cleanly on the packed snow at the yard's edge. Successful run, Palak said. Velocity stable. No loss of control. No collision injuries. Randall raised both arms, fists clenched. A triumphant yell echoed across the yard. Inside, Whitney watched from the kitchen window, arms folded. You're going to shatter your tailbone one of these days. That's why I added the gardening cushion under the seat, he called, trudging back toward the ramp. She opened the door and leaned out. You're going to dislocate something just climbing that again. I've got 2 knees and a dream. Don't say that like it's a plan. He walked past her, now red-faced and breathing heavily. Where's the thermal tape? Under the sink. 15 minutes later, he was back outside, now with a scarf wrapped around his thighs. In the orbiting vessel, Nuray looked genuinely puzzled. What purpose does that serve? Unclear, Ferrick said. But he believes it helps. Humans exhibit belief-based resilience. Palak asked. More often than not. 2 hours passed. Randall completed 4 more runs. Each one slightly faster, slightly riskier. On the 5th, he overshot the track and swerved into a snowbank, flipping the sled and landing sprawled across a bush. Whitney burst out the back door. You okay? He coughed once, then gave a thumb up. Bush broke my fall. It's a dead bush. Still counts. You're limping again. Just one side. Means nothing's symmetrical. That's worse. Later that evening, he sat on the floor with a heating pad and a half-eaten sandwich. Whitney stood over him with her phone, reading off a list. Contusions, possible rib strain, moderate abrasions, mild dehydration, and you're short of breath. That's from laughing. No, that's from ignoring your lungs. They're fine. She knelt beside him, You're not proving anything. I am, actually. You're not in a competition. I'm in a demonstration. Of what? That we don't stop just because it hurts. We adapt. We rework. We try again. She sat back. That's noble and all. But it sounds like something you say right before you sign a medical waiver. He winced slightly as he adjusted the heating pad. I'm not reckless. You built a launch ramp out of a gutter. I reinforced it. With a laundry basket. He nodded. She rubbed her temple. You are a mechanical engineer. You work with load distribution and stress tolerances. You know better than this. I also know that sometimes you don't wait for the perfect conditions. You just do the thing, then fix it after. We're talking about your spine. I have a backup plan. You do not have a backup spine. In orbit, the Trelvani Council gathered for final review. A full cycle of observation had passed and the time for recommendation had arrived. Nure stepped forward. Recommendation: delay colonization due to inconsistent species behavior, high variability in decision-making under environmental duress, and unpredictable use of available resources. Farah countered. Recommendation: reclassify human resilience as dynamic. Not bound to physiological tolerance alone. They do not merely survive, they reinterpret survival itself. Palak added, they reframe discomfort as challenge. Risk becomes ritual. The room was silent for a long moment. Nure turned to the display. Randall had re-entered the yard, now dragging the broken sled back toward the garage. He limped, but he was humming. This is not a species that understands limits, she said. Farah nodded. That's precisely the point. Back on Earth, Randall sat on the couch with a bowl of ice cream balanced on his knee. Whitney curled beside him, reading a book, occasionally glancing at the bruises peeking out from under his pajama shorts. So, he said, I was thinking of adding a second chute. Maybe curve it around the maple tree. No, it wouldn't be steep. No, I'll use real brackets this time. No, he paused. We could ride it together. No, she repeated, then nudged him gently with her foot. But I'll help you build it. As long as you promise to wear pants. Deal. Above, in the quiet of low orbit, the Trelvani vessel began preparations to depart. All data had been catalogued. All conclusions drawn. As the ship ascended, the final report was submitted. Planetary recommendation deferred. Species assessment inconclusive. Resilience index underestimated. Cultural note: shorts in winter may indicate advanced psychological insulation or refusal to yield to natural hostility. The last image transmitted before the ship left orbit showed Randall standing in the yard, one arm around Whitney, the other pointing toward a stack of lumber. He was smiling. And, of course, wearing shorts.